The scorching Arizona sun hung like a molten coin in the sky as Olivia Blackett stepped off the stagecoach into Rattlesnake Gulch, her threadbare carpet bag clutched tightly to her chest, the last remnant of a life she'd left behind in Boston. The year was 1875, and the promise of a teaching position in this frontier town was all that stood between her and destitution after her father's death had left her penniless and alone. The journey west had been grueling, but nothing had prepared her for the raw, untamed reality of Rattlesnake Gulch. The main street was little more than a dirt path lined with weathered buildings, their facades bleached by the relentless sun. Men in dusty clothes and worn boots loitered outside establishments with names like Lucky Strike Saloon and Prospector's Paradise, their eyes following her with undisguised interest as she made her way toward the schoolhouse. "Madam, you must be the new teacher," called a voice. Olivia turned to see a portly man hurrying toward her, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "I'm Mayor Hollister. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "The stagecoach made better time than anticipated," Olivia replied, attempting to smooth the wrinkles from her travel-worn dress. "I'm eager to see the schoolhouse." The mayor's expression fell. About that, there's been a complication. The roof collapsed last week during a storm. It'll be at least a month before repairs are completed." Olivia felt her heart sink. "I see, and where am I to stay in the meantime?" "We've arranged lodging at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house," Mayor Hollister said, pointing to a whitewashed building at the end of the street. "But I'm afraid without the school open, we can't offer you your full salary just yet." The words struck Olivia like a physical blow. Her meager savings would barely last 2 weeks. "I see," she said again, struggling to maintain her composure. "Then I shall need to find additional employment until the repairs are complete." Mayor Hollister's eyes darted away from hers. "Not many opportunities for a lady of your standing in Rattlesnake Gulch, but perhaps Mrs. Peterson might know of something suitable." Mrs. Peterson, as it turned out, did not. The stern-faced widow showed Olivia to a sparse room on the second floor of her boarding house, explaining the rules in clipped tones that brooked no argument. "No gentlemen callers, no alcohol, no returning after 9 in the evening. Breakfast at 6, dinner at 5, she concluded. "That's included in your board. Anything else, you're on your own." Alone in her room, Olivia sank onto the narrow bed and allowed herself a moment of despair. The position had seemed like providence when the advertisement appeared in the Boston newspaper. Now, she was stranded in a dusty frontier town with limited funds and no immediate prospects. Morning brought no relief. After a breakfast of watery porridge and weak coffee, Olivia set out to explore the town, hoping to discover opportunities the mayor and Mrs. Peterson had overlooked. The general store had no need for additional help. The post office was run by a family of 5. The dressmaker looked at her fine-boned hands and laughed outright at the idea of Olivia wielding needle and thread for paying customers. By mid-afternoon, her feet ached and her spirits had plummeted further. She paused outside the Lucky Strike Saloon, drawn by the tinny sounds of a piano and the momentary escape its shade offered from the punishing sun. "You look like you could use a drink, miss," said a voice beside her. Olivia turned to find a man in a garish waistcoat eyeing her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Name's Dexter Quinn. I own the Lucky Strike." "I was merely resting," Olivia said stiffly, preparing to move on. "And I'm offering you a job," Quinn replied, his voice dropping lower. "My girl who serves drinks took off with a cattle driver last week. Pays well and you get to keep your tips." Olivia recoiled at the suggestion. "I'm the new schoolteacher, Mr. Quinn. I couldn't possibly—" "School ain't open from what I hear," Quinn interrupted. "And word travels fast in Rattlesnake Gulch. You need money, I need help. Simple as that." Before Olivia could formulate a response, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A group of cowboys had ridden into town, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. They dismounted outside the bank, their spurs jingling as boots hit dirt. One man stood out from the rest, tall, broad-shouldered, his face partially obscured by the brim of his hat. Unlike his companions, whose laughter and loud voices announced their arrival, he moved with a quiet intensity that commanded attention. "Looks like the Jared outfit's in town," Quinn muttered, his expression souring. "That's Vaughn Jared himself, owns the biggest spread north of here. Those boys'll be thirsty after their business is done." Olivia watched as Vaughn Jared removed his hat briefly to wipe his brow, revealing a strong-jawed face weathered by sun and wind. His dark hair was cropped short at the sides but longer on top, and even from a distance, she could see his eyes scanning the street with the wariness of a man accustomed to anticipating trouble. "Think about my offer," Quinn said, reclaiming her attention. "You won't find better in this town." He tipped his hat and disappeared back into the saloon. Olivia stood frozen, her mind racing through increasingly desperate calculations. She had exactly $8.43 to her name. Once her room and board were paid, she would have nothing left. The school might not open for weeks, possibly months if the mayor had been downplaying the extent of the damage. Could she serve drinks in a saloon and still maintain her respectability? Could she face the children and their parents once the school opened, knowing where she had worked? Did she have a choice? The bank door opened and the Cowboys emerged, Vaughn Jared among them. As they headed toward the saloon, Olivia made her decision. Drawing a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and followed them inside. The Lucky Strike was dimly lit, the air thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of cheap whiskey. Heads turned as she entered, conversations momentarily pausing before resuming with greater animation. Quinn spotted her from behind the bar and grinned, gesturing her over. "Changed your mind, did you?" he said, reaching beneath the counter and producing an apron. "Put this on. Glasses need to be filled, tables need to be cleaned. Don't let the boys get too friendly, but don't discourage them either. Tips are how you'll make your real money." Olivia took the apron with trembling fingers. "I'll need a place to store my bag." Quinn jerked his thumb toward a door behind the bar. "My office. You can leave it there for now." For the next few hours, Olivia navigated the crowded saloon, balancing trays of drinks and deflecting unwanted advances with as much grace as she could muster. Some of the men were surprisingly respectful once they realized she wasn't one of the upstairs girls Quinn employed. Others required more forceful reminders of proper behavior. She was wiping down a recently vacated table when a shadow fell across her work. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Vaughn Jared. "You're new," he said simply, his voice a deep baritone that somehow carried despite the noise around them. "Yes," Olivia replied, straightening. Up close, his eyes were a startling blue, clear and perceptive beneath dark brows. "This isn't a place for someone like you," he continued, his gaze sweeping over her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "I don't believe we're acquainted well enough for you to make that judgment, Mr. Jared," Olivia replied, lifting her chin. Something like surprise flickered across his features, followed by the ghost of a smile. "Fair enough, Miss Blackett, Olivia Blackett," he nodded once. "Careful who you serve, Miss Blackett. Some men in here don't know when to stop drinking or otherwise." Before she could respond, he moved past her to join his men at a corner table, leaving Olivia with the unsettling feeling that he had seen more of her circumstances than she cared to reveal. As the evening wore on, the saloon grew more crowded and rowdy. Olivia's feet ached, and her arms felt leaden from carrying trays. She had collected nearly $2 in tips, a small fortune under her current circumstances, but the constant vigilance required to navigate the increasingly intoxicated patrons was wearing on her nerves. She was returning to the bar with an empty tray when a hand shot out, catching her wrist. The grip belonged to a man with a week's growth of beard and breath that reeked of whiskey. "How about you take a break and sit with me a spell, pretty lady?" he slurred, attempting to pull her onto his lap. "Please release me, sir," Olivia said firmly, trying to extricate herself without causing a scene. "Aw, don't be like that," the man persisted, his grip tightening painfully. "Just being friendly." "The lady asked you to let go," came a quiet voice from behind them. Vaughn Jared stood there, his expression neutral but his eyes cold, the drunk's face contorted with anger. Mind your own business, Jared. Me and the lady are just getting acquainted. Last warning, Vaughn said, still in that deceptively calm tone. For a moment, Olivia thought the man might back down. Instead, he shoved her aside and lunged to his feet, swinging wildly at Vaughn. The rancher sidestepped the clumsy attack with ease, delivering a precise blow to the drunk's midsection that doubled him over. That's enough. Quinn shouted, emerging from behind the bar. Take it outside if you're fixing to fight. The commotion had drawn the attention of the drunk's companions, who rose menacingly from their table. Simultaneously, Vaughn's cowboys stood as well, hands hovering near their sidearms. In the tense silence that followed, Quinn's eyes darted between the groups, calculating the potential damage to his establishment. Coming to a decision, he grabbed Olivia's arm. "You're causing more trouble than you're worth," he hissed, dragging her toward the back of the saloon. "Deal with the new girl," he called to a hard-faced woman emerging from the staircase. "Put her to work upstairs. She'll earn her keep one way or another." "No," Olivia protested, struggling against his grip. "That wasn't our arrangement." Quinn's only response was to shove her through a door into a dimly lit back room where several women in various states of undress lounged on divans and chairs. The hard-faced woman followed them in, closing the door behind her. "What have we here?" she asked, eyeing Olivia with cold appraisal. "A bit plain, but some men prefer that innocent look." "I am not, I will not," Olivia sputtered, backing away until she hit a wall. "You will if you want to stay in this town," Quinn sneered. "Nobody else is hiring, and I've got friends in every business worth mentioning. Cross me, and you'll find yourself sleeping in the livery stable." A crash from the main room interrupted whatever threat would have followed. The sound of breaking glass and shouting men filtered through the door. "What now?" Quinn muttered, turning toward the commotion. The door burst open, revealing Vaughn Jared, his knuckles bloody and his expression thunderous. Behind him, the main room of the saloon had erupted into chaos, tables overturned, men grappling with each other, the piano player cowering behind his instrument. "You've got no business back here, Jared," Quinn said, his hand moving toward the small revolver at his waist. Vaughn's eyes found Olivia's, a silent question in their depths. She gave an imperceptible nod, and something in his face hardened. "The lady's coming with me," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Quinn's hand closed around his revolver. "She works for me now, and I decide where she goes and what she does." What happened next occurred so quickly that Olivia barely had time to register it. Vaughn closed the distance between himself and Quinn in 2 long strides, his fist connecting with the saloon owner's jaw with a sickening crack. Quinn staggered backward, the revolver clattering to the floor unfired. The hard-faced woman screamed, and one of the other girls darted for the door, presumably to summon help. Vaughn caught Olivia's hand. "We need to go, now." She didn't hesitate. As he pulled her through the door back into the main room, Olivia gasped at the scene before them. Nearly every man in the place was engaged in combat, fists and chairs flying indiscriminately. Vaughn's cowboys were holding their own against a much larger group, creating a path toward the entrance. "Stay close," Vaughn instructed, not releasing her hand. They had made it halfway across the room when a burly man with a handlebar mustache blocked their path, a broken bottle clutched in his fist. "Where do you think you're taking her?" he demanded, jabbing the jagged glass in Vaughn's direction. "Out of this hellhole," Vaughn replied, pushing Olivia slightly behind him. "Step aside." The man lunged forward, the bottle slashing toward Vaughn's face. The rancher ducked beneath the attack, driving his shoulder into his opponent's midsection and sending him crashing into a nearby table. Before the man could recover, Vaughn landed 2 quick blows that left him sprawled and motionless. 3 more men converged on them, friends of the fallen fighter. Vaughn met the first with a devastating right hook, but the other 2 tackled him to the ground. Olivia looked around frantically for a weapon, spotting a wooden chair that had somehow remained intact amidst the destruction. Seizing it by the back, she brought it down on the head of one of Vaughn's attackers with all her strength. The chair splintered, the man collapsing in a heap. Vaughn managed to throw off the remaining assailant, regaining his feet and reclaiming Olivia's hand in the same fluid motion. "Remind me never to make you angry," he said, the ghost of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth despite the chaos surrounding them. They resumed their progress toward the door, Vaughn fending off two more attackers with efficient, brutal strikes. One of his cowboys appeared beside them, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Boss, time to go," he panted. "Sheriff's on his way and Quinn's got him in his pocket." Vaughn nodded, turning to Olivia. "Is there anything you need from upstairs? Belongings, my bag," she said, suddenly remembering. "It's in Quinn's office." "Sam," Vaughn said to the cowboy, "cover the door. Don't let anyone follow us out." Keeping Olivia close, he navigated around the edge of the room toward the bar and the door beyond it. Quinn was nowhere to be seen, likely still unconscious in the back room. The office door was unlocked, the small space cluttered with ledgers and bottles of premium liquor. Olivia spotted her carpet bag on the floor beside the desk and snatched it up. "I have it." As they emerged from the office, a newcomer entered the saloon, a tall man wearing a tarnished star on his vest. The sheriff surveyed the devastation with practiced indifference before his gaze settled on Vaughn and Olivia. "Causing trouble again, Jared," he drawled. "Quinn's going to want compensation for the damages." "Quinn tried to force this lady into working upstairs against her will," Vaughn replied, his voice steady. "I'm taking her out of here, and if you try to stop me, you'll regret it." The sheriff's hand drifted toward his holster. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," Vaughn said quietly. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, the sounds of the ongoing brawl providing a chaotic backdrop to their standoff. Finally, the sheriff's hand dropped away from his weapon. "Get her out of town by morning," he said, "and don't come back for a while, Jared. Next time, I might not be feeling so reasonable." Vaughn gave a curt nod and guided Olivia toward the door, where Sam and two other cowboys waited. Together, they stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the mayhem of the lucky strike behind them. "Are you hurt?" Vaughn asked, examining her face in the moonlight. "No," Olivia replied, her voice steadier than she expected given the circumstances. "But I seem to have lost my position and my accommodation in one evening." Vaughn's mouth quirked upward. "I might be able to help with that. My sister runs the household at Jared Ranch. She's been pestering me to hire a tutor for my niece and nephew." Olivia blinked at him, wondering if she had misheard. "A tutor?" Mayor Hollister mentioned a new schoolteacher had arrived in town, Vaughn explained. "When I saw you in the saloon, I figured you must be her. The school roof collapse is common knowledge." "You knew who I was all along," Olivia said, realization dawning. Vaughn shrugged, a gesture somehow both casual and elegant. "I make it my business to know what happens in and around Rattlesnake Gulch. The children need education, and my sister's kids are no exception. The position includes room and board, of course." Olivia hesitated, weighing her options, which admittedly were few. "How far is your ranch?" "About 3 hours' ride. We can leave tonight, or I can arrange a hotel room for you if you'd prefer to rest first." "After what just happened, I think I'd prefer to put as much distance between myself and Rattlesnake Gulch as possible," Olivia decided. Vaughn smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his weather-beaten face and made something flutter in Olivia's chest. "I was hoping you'd say that. My horse is this way." As they walked toward the hitching post where Vaughn's horse stood waiting, Olivia found herself studying the man beside her. He had fought his way through a saloon full of men to help a woman he barely knew, offering her sanctuary without hesitation. In Boston, such behavior would have been considered scandalously improper. Here, in this wild frontier, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Mr. Jared," she said suddenly, stopping in her tracks. He turned, eyebrows raised in question. "Thank you," Olivia said simply. "For what you did back there." His expression softened. "Call me Vaughn, and no thanks needed, Miss Blackett. Some things are just right, and some are just wrong. Getting you out of there was right." In that moment, standing beneath the vast starlit sky of the Arizona Territory, Olivia felt something shift inside her, a recognition that perhaps this harsh, beautiful land offered something her proper Boston upbringing never had. the freedom to determine her own path, and the chance to discover who she truly was. Vaughn's ranch sprawled across a valley nestled between two mountain ranges, its white painted main house visible for miles. They arrived as dawn was breaking, the journey having passed in comfortable conversation punctuated by companionable silences. Olivia had learned that Vaughn had inherited the ranch 5 years earlier following his father's death, that he lived there with his widowed sister and her 2 children, and that he had ambitious plans to expand his cattle operation into new territories. In turn, she had shared the circumstances that had brought her west her father's gambling debts, the loss of their Boston home, her determination to make a new life for herself rather than accept a loveless marriage proposal from her father's former business partner, a man 30 years her senior. "You're braver than most men I know," Vaughn had commented when she finished her tale. The simple compliment had warmed her more than she cared to admit. Vaughn's sister, Victoria, greeted them at the door, her initial surprise at her brother's early return with a female companion quickly replaced by genuine warmth once the situation was explained. "You poor dear," she said, ushering Olivia inside. "What a terrible welcome to the West. But you're safe now, and we're delighted to have you. The children will be ecstatic. They've been desperate for proper lessons." The children in question, 10-year-old Thomas and 8-year-old Alina, were indeed ecstatic when they were introduced to their new tutor at breakfast. They peppered Olivia with questions about Boston, books, and whether she knew how to ride a horse. She didn't, or shoot a gun, also no. "Don't worry," Alina assured her solemnly. "Uncle Vaughn can teach you. He taught me, and I can hit a can at 20 paces. Is that so?" Olivia replied, glancing at Vaughn, who was watching the exchange with undisguised amusement. "Only if Miss Blackett wants to learn," he said, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "Some skills aren't necessary for everyone." "I think I'd like to learn both," Olivia heard herself say. "Riding and shooting. If I'm to live in the West, I should know how to navigate it properly." Something like approval flashed in Vaughn's eyes. "Then I'd be happy to teach you." The days that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were devoted to the children's education, afternoons to Olivia's. Vaughn proved a patient teacher, guiding her through the basics of horsemanship with a steady hand and calm instructions. By the end of her first week at Jared Ranch, she could mount and ride at a walk without assistance. By the end of the second, she was confidently trotting around the corral. Shooting lessons began in her 3rd week. Vaughn started her with a small revolver, explaining the mechanics of loading, aiming, and firing with the same methodical care he had shown with riding. "The key is respect," he told her as they stood side by side at a makeshift target range behind the barn. "Not fear. Respect the weapon, respect what it can do, and respect yourself enough to be cautious but confident." Olivia nodded, absorbing his words along with the feel of the revolver in her hand. It was heavier than she had expected, the metal warm from the sun. "Take your stance," Vaughn instructed, moving to stand behind her. His hands came up to adjust her posture, one at her shoulder, one at her waist. Feet shoulder width apart, arm extended but not locked, both eyes open. His proximity sent her pulse racing, and Olivia found herself suddenly very aware of his scent, leather and sunshine, and something indefinably male. She took a steadying breath, trying to focus on the target rather than the warmth of his body behind hers. "Now squeeze the trigger," he said, his voice low near her ear. "Don't pull it, squeeze like you're gently pressing a flower petal." Olivia did as instructed, and the revolver bucked in her hand. The report was deafening, but she maintained her grip, a small thrill of satisfaction running through her when she saw she had hit the edge of the target. "Good," Vaughn said, stepping back. "Very good for a first shot. Try again." By the time they returned to the house for dinner, Olivia's arm ached, but she felt a sense of accomplishment that transcended the physical discomfort. She had hit the target more often than not, and Vaughn's praise had been genuine. "You're a natural," he told her as they walked side by side, the setting sun casting long shadows across the yard. "Most people flinch at the sound, but you stayed steady." "I've always been stubborn," Olivia replied with a small smile. My father used to say it would be my downfall. Or your salvation, Vaughn countered. Out here, stubbornness is often the difference between success and failure, between life and death sometimes. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of mutual respect that felt like the foundation of something deeper. For a breathless moment, Olivia thought he might move closer, might bridge the small distance between them. Instead, he cleared his throat and gestured toward the house. We should get inside. Victoria will be wondering where we are. The moment passed, but the feeling it had evoked lingered, coloring their interactions in the days that followed. Olivia found herself watching Vaughn when he thought she wasn't looking, noticing small details she had missed before the crinkles at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the careful gentleness with which he treated his horse, the quiet authority he commanded without ever raising his voice. In turn, she sometimes caught him observing her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. During their lessons, his hands lingered a fraction longer than necessary when adjusting her posture or helping her dismount. At dinner, he sought her opinions on books, politics, the future of the territory. In the evenings, when the children were in bed and Victoria occupied with her needlework, they often sat on the porch, talking late into the night while the vast desert sky wheeled overhead. 6 weeks after her arrival at Jared Ranch, a letter arrived from Rattlesnake Gulch. The school repairs were complete, and Mayor Hollister requested her return to fulfill her contract as the town's teacher. Olivia read the letter twice, her heart sinking with each word. She had grown to love life at the ranch, the clean air, the honest work, the children's eager minds, and most of all, the deepening connection with Vaughn. Victoria found her sitting on the porch, the letter crumpled in her hand. Bad news, she asked, settling into the chair beside Olivia's. The school in Rattlesnake Gulch is repaired. They want me to start teaching next week. Victoria was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. And how do you feel about that? Conflicted, Olivia admitted. I signed a contract, I gave my word, but you've found a home here, Victoria finished for her. And perhaps something more, Olivia looked at her sharply. I don't know what you mean. Victoria's smile was gentle but knowing. My brother hasn't looked at a woman the way he looks at you since before the war. And I've seen how your eyes follow him when you think no one is watching. Heat rose to Olivia's cheeks. Even if that were true, he hasn't said anything to suggest he feels that way. Vaughn has always been cautious with his heart, Victoria said. Our father taught him that a man in his position had to be wary of women seeking financial security rather than genuine affection. And then there was Caroline. Caroline? Olivia echoed, something uncomfortable twisting in her chest. They were engaged before the war. She couldn't bear the waiting and uncertainty while he was away fighting, so she married a shopkeeper in Tucson. Victoria sighed. Vaughn never spoke of it when he returned, but I know it wounded him deeply. Olivia digested this information, understanding better now why Vaughn maintained a certain reserve despite the obvious connection between them. I should still honor my commitment, she said finally, whatever my personal feelings might be. Victoria patted her hand. You should do what you believe is right, but don't assume you know what Vaughn wants without asking him directly. That evening, Olivia sought out Vaughn in the barn where he was checking on a mare about to foal. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting with a smile that made her heart skip. I was hoping you'd come by, he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. Daisy here could deliver any day now. Olivia approached the stall, reaching out to stroke the mare's velvety nose. She's beautiful. She is, Vaughn agreed, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. What's on your mind? You look troubled. Wordlessly, Olivia handed him the letter. He scanned it quickly, his expression growing still. I see, he said finally. When will you leave? I haven't decided that I will, Olivia replied, summoning her courage. I wanted to discuss it with you first. Vaughn folded the letter carefully, returning it to her. It's your decision, Olivia. You signed a contract, and I know you take your commitments seriously. The children here have benefited enormously from your teaching, but they don't have the same claim on your time that the town does. And what about you? Olivia asked softly. Do you have a claim on my time? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with all the unspoken feelings of the past weeks. Vaughn's eyes searched hers, caution warring with something warmer, more urgent. I would never presume to claim your time or dictate your choices, he said carefully. But I would be lying if I said I wanted you to go. Olivia took a step closer, heart hammering against her ribs. Why don't you want me to go, Vaughn? For a moment, she thought he might retreat behind the reserve he so often maintained. Instead, he reached out, his calloused fingers brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Because these weeks with you have been the happiest I've known in years, he said, his voice low and intense. Because I find myself looking for you whenever I enter a room, because the thought of not seeing you each day makes it hard to breathe. Olivia's throat tightened with emotion. I feel the same, she whispered. Vaughn's hand cupped her cheek, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew those hands possessed. Stay, he said simply, not because of a contract or obligation, stay because you want to, stay because we could build something here together. What about my promise to the town? Olivia asked, though her heart had already made its decision. We'll find them another teacher, Vaughn said, someone without a prior claim on her heart. Is that what you have, a claim on my heart? Instead of answering with words, Vaughn lowered his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both question and answer. Olivia responded without hesitation, her arms winding around his neck as she yielded to the feelings she had harbored for so long. When they finally parted, both breathless, Vaughn rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Olivia Blackett. I think I have since I saw you standing in that saloon, so out of place and yet so determined to forge your own path. I love you too, Olivia replied, the words coming easily, naturally. I'm staying, Vaughn, not for the children or the position, but for you, for us. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, full of promise and hope. Then we have plans to make, letters to write, a future to build. Together, Olivia agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. 3 months later, Olivia stood on the porch of Jared Ranch, now her home in every sense that mattered. The gold band on her left hand caught the light as she waved to Vaughn, returning from a day of work with the cattle. Beside her, Thomas and Alina were engaged in a spirited debate about their history lesson, while Victoria rocked in her chair, knitting what would soon be a welcome gift for the newest member of their family, expected in the early summer. As Vaughn dismounted and strode toward her, his face breaking into the smile he reserved only for her, Olivia reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A collapsed schoolhouse, a desperate decision to work in a saloon. A moment of danger that had revealed a man of honor and courage. From that chaos had emerged the greatest blessing of her life, a love as vast and enduring as the western sky above them. A home where she truly belonged, and the freedom to be herself, completely and without apology. Vaughn reached the porch, taking the steps 2 at a time to reach her. How are my favorite people today? He asked, one arm encircling her waist as he ruffled Alina's hair with his free hand. Better now that you're home, Olivia replied, leaning into his embrace, and it was true. Home wasn't the elegant house in Boston where she had grown up, nor the schoolhouse in Rattlesnake Gulch where she had planned to build her future. Home was here, in this sprawling ranch house with its weathered boards and creaking floors. Home was with this man who had fought his way through a saloon full of opponents to rescue her, who had taught her to ride and shoot and believe in herself. Home was wherever they were together. And that was all she would ever need.